I'm delighted now to invite Raphael Hubert, who is the head of HR for Cargill, to join us, and that's Cargill Ocean Transportation. Raphael is going to guide us through how Cargill are considering alternative approaches when it comes to sourcing talent in terms of through a DE and I lens. Raphael, I can see that you're coming up on the screen, so I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself and join us, and then we'll get the screen share underway as well.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, absolutely.
Okay, great, it worked. Okay, good. Good
It's
morning.
the first starting point, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Hello, good morning to everyone.
Right, so what we'll do is if we do the, we'll get the screen share underway, Raphael, and leave you to run through it and perhaps have a quick catch up at the end.
Okay, fantastic, great, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much. Good morning and good afternoon to those that are connecting elsewhere from the world. And yeah, as Heidi mentioned, my name is Raphael Hubert, Head of Human Resources for Cargill's Ocean Transportation Team. We have over 300 people globally, operating over 750 vessels at any one time across the oceans, and have teams located from the US to Singapore, here in Europe, also Bulgaria and in India and in Asia Pacific as well. One of the things that we wanted to share today was really how we want to change our approach to sourcing of talent from a diversity inclusion perspective. Now, key to this is really starting broadly and really gauging the commitment to fostering a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's key to start with that, because if we don't have top-down leadership and commitment to this, it's very hard midway in the organization or from a grassroots approach to do so. And with this, I really applaud our CEO, Jan and many members of our leadership team who take this topic seriously. It's challenging, but are able to understand it and dialogue, listen, and manage the paradoxes that exist in this area. So without that commitment, it's very difficult to manage this because it's a very complex topic. So I guess from that perspective, in ocean transportation, we're committed to creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment. And key to these programs in general that are multifaceted, basically you need three things. One is establishing objectives around the different topics. The second one is, what are the initiatives that you put in place to meet the objectives? And then have some sort of measurement of whether or not you're tracking that. So I'll give you an idea of what this means concretely. So it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So an example of an objective would be you want an inclusive work environment. And how do you do that? So the initiatives would be whether it's focus groups or connecting with employees regularly to see how they're doing. And then you can also formalize that with what we have as an engagement survey. And we get a measurement of inclusion within our engagement survey. So you have the objective, which is the inclusiveness. How do people interact with their colleagues, how they interact with their managers, and how they interact with the corporation in general, in terms of feeling welcome and safe. And then we have the measurement. So that's an example of how you go from an objective, an initiative, and a measurement. What I wanted to share with you today was just one of the many objectives that we have that highlights probably one of our biggest challenges, which is gender diversity, gender representation on our shore-based staff in trading. And what's key here to understand is that, like in many parts of the shipping industry, there are not a lot of female traders necessarily, freight traders in the market. So, and also in the leadership roles as well. And since 2015, we've been tracking numbers for our leadership roles. And again, the objective that we have is to increase the level of female leaders in our workforce. We also want to increase the level of the numbers of female traders in our workforce. That's the objective. And what I want to show you today is this initiative to help us achieve that, but more from a pipeline approach, because what we realize is that from a leadership perspective, when you have let's say, less representation of whatever diverse group that you're looking for or competencies, what's important is pipelining, or going early and bringing people earlier into the organization so that they can go into those activities. So what I want to highlight here for you today is this on the next slide, is something completely new for us, because what we realized in trading, it's a very fast-paced, pressured environment. And the significant change that we made here is we're not waiting anymore for a position to open up and then look for talent. So what happens is that when a position opens up and then you start at that time to fill a role, there's a lot of pressure pushing people to fill the roles as quickly as possible. An open trading position that doesn't have someone in it is not making money in very simple terms. And it's similar to a plant not functioning, and for every day the plant is closed, you're not making money. So there's a lot of pressure to kind of source. And in the sourcing project that we just put in place, we realized that, well, let's not wait until positions are open. So we decided to create 3 roles that are not, on top of the existing roles, take our time and to map the market. Okay, so you can see here on the slide at the bottom, we basically, through this exercise, we found that in Geneva, there's over 550 professionals, and 85% of them are male. And if you look at our competitors as well, that's a total number of traders that they have. And you can see that, let's say on average, 15% are female. So you're really already challenged. So if you're in a rush to fill, the tendency would be to go for your traditional way of hiring. So what was key here was just to recruit and identify who is in the market, and then once you identify who is in the market, start discussing with them. So key here was this approach that we did. If you go to the next page, it was multifaceted approach. We realized that we have to, on the one hand, also use the social media to make people aware of the opportunities that exist in ocean transportation. So we worked with our recruitment department to put together a social branding, kind of employer branding media campaign to really illustrate to people outside, and to describe who we are in terms of the work that we do, the type of people we work, the kind of the environment that people find. So we did a total of 5 different postings with different people from our organization to give people an idea of who we are, what we do, and what is it like really working for us. After post 5, we had 125,000 views. We had almost 2,500 likes, 28 comments. We had 330 applications. Our recruiters spoke to 50 people directly and shortlisted 12. So there's kind of the market mapping, so really digging into that 15% of the market of females to identify people that could be be viable candidates for our roles. And last week we went through the assessment center. Of the 9, we had 6 that attended an assessment center. We have people with backgrounds between 3 to 5 years of university, economics, math, finance, different nationalities: Spanish, Swiss, French, Croatian, Greek, Russian, Italian, and British. And we're in the process this week of making an offer to 3 of them. And we're very proud of that. And the key here is, what I've seen is, first of all, the commitment. We had commitment from the senior leadership to create a budget for this outside of our normal. The second thing was not to wait for positions to open up and do the market mapping and the pipelining and discussing with people, really getting to know the talent. And the third thing, which is not the least important, probably the most important, is challenging what we defined as qualified. So historically, we would look for people with shipping background and trading. And again, that even limits yourself even more. And I really applaud the team here in ocean transportation to challenge and say, look, we don't really need the shipping. One of the teams counted, we have over like 1,000 years worth of shipping experience. But we said, what are the real skills that we're looking for behaviors? There's risk-taking, entrepreneurship, trading skills in other commodities. And it's fantastic to see that we can go and challenge ourselves in what we actually define as qualified. And I think those are the 3 things: commitment from the top, not waiting for positions to open up. And then the last one is really challenging ourselves what it means to be qualified. So this was the first time we did this, and we're a lot of learning, but we're very proud to say that we're in the process of making an offer to 3 very qualified people that went through a very extensive assessment center as well, with diverse interview panels. And again, going back to what I said before, to illustrate our commitment, is what is the objective? We want to have more diverse workforce, not only gender, but also backgrounds and nationalities and ways of thinking. The initiative is this social media market mapping campaign, and the way we measure it is, the number of people we have and the ratios that we have. So with that, I just want to say that it's something new, but we're very proud that we've been able to do this.
Thank you so much, Raphael. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and for everybody, because I think it's some of those points that you've summarised there, but also that that you stressed at the beginning was the commitment from leadership top down to this, and the allocation of resource, which I think when you look at the D&I as well, outside of where we're at as an industry at the moment, so much of this is about don't give it lip service. You've got to have the backup behind it in order to drive the change. And to see you taking, an inspirational stand on it and actually creating positions, with my recruitment hat on, it's most of the roles we have, we need to fill yesterday. It's very rarely that we're talking about tomorrow or a bit further into the future. So I think this can hopefully start, seeing some more progress in that way. So, and do you have any idea? Do you have a schedule for these people coming in terms of their progression and development?
Yeah, so this was very targeted for trading, so freight trading.
Yep.
We have the different size vessels desks that will start at probably on the lower, let's say, junior to a little bit more experience. We have 3 different profiles, some with a bit more experience. So they'll go through, and we'll bring them in and put them on the freight trading desks, and they'll have different roles. They'll have to learn a little bit how we work, but we have a lot of shipping experience, so that's not going to be a trouble explaining them how we do this. But we're as part of the assessments, we looked at their cognitive skills, analytical skills, their ability to communicate, and then different things. And we believe that that these people will bring a different way of looking at things, and a different way of working, and maybe challenging as well for us to kind of also open up and welcome and change the way we look at things as well. So I think it's a start of something quite exciting. And we're in the process of making the offers and seeing when they can start. So that's good.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to hearing more. So again, that bringing together people of different perspectives and the integration as well, as you say, it's going to be interesting to see how that works. But thank you so much, Raphael. That was really, really interesting. Thank you. So now moving on to our next presentation and discussion, I'm delighted to introduce Adino Driscoll, who is Vice President of Corporate Services for Ardmore. And as I mentioned earlier, Ardmore are very committed also to DE&I, and we're one of the founding members of the DSG. But with a comparatively small shore-based employee population, we're just really keen to get some insights for others who might be in a similar position. You're thinking, is D&I exclusive for large organisations, for the large corporates who can roll out the processes? And it's certainly not the case, but I am delighted Aideen's able to join us to discuss that in more detail. Welcome, Aideen, great to see you.
Thanks very much, Heidi. It's great to be here this morning, and it's lovely to have an opportunity to speak with you all. Am I on camera now, Heidi?
You are. Yeah, good. We can see and hear you, which is always reassuring.
Perfect. Great. Thanks. So this is I think a really nice opportunity to I suppose talk a little bit about how we approach D&I within Ardmore. As Heidi mentioned, from a shore staff perspective, we are quite small. So we have a shore staff of 53 people spread out across our offices in Cork, in Singapore, and in Houston. And diversity and inclusion has been a priority for the organisation for some time now, and something that we have focused on and worked quite hard on. So I suppose what's interesting about an organisation like this is when you've got 53 people, you all know each other really well. So when it comes to metrics or statistics, I mean, that information is really easy to gather for us. And, You know, we have a deep knowledge and understanding of our people. We know who they are, where they're from. We know their families. It's quite contained. And I suppose looking at it from an objective standpoint, you would say, well, we're already a pretty diverse bunch, which I think is quite typical for shipping. We have 10 plus nationalities within those 53 people, and we actually have more women than men working for the organization right now. So when it came to introducing the topic of diversity and inclusion within Ardmore, sometimes the reaction that you get, or that at least in the beginning that we got, was, you know, do we not already have this accomplished? Is the box not ticked? We're diverse, let's move on. We've got bigger, better things to talk about. And I suppose that's the real challenge of it, particularly with a small organization, when people are looking around saying, oh, well, you know, job done. So the challenge for us, and the thing that I'd like to talk about, rather than getting into the specifics of diversity, equity, or inclusion initiatives, is to talk about how we built a foundation, I suppose, upon which all of these initiatives can rest. Because I think for a small organization, that's so crucial to do from the very outset. So I suppose the first thing that we think is absolutely crucially important is to focus on the why of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to make sure that that's ingrained within the organization. So those initial conversations are so important, to pull out people's ideas of why DEI is important within an organization. So our experience was you very often get reactions like, you know, it's about doing the right thing. It's about supporting individuals. It's about giving people opportunities, and all of those things are wonderful. But really what's so important is that people understand that the why of DEI is business performance. Diversity, equity, and inclusion lead to significantly better business performance. This is about competitive advantage, and pointing people to hard statistics that prove that this is the case. I mean, that's building your business case for prioritizing DEI. And there are so many of them out there. Heidi, I think you referenced it at the start as well. You've got McKinsey reports, Boston, the Boston Consulting Group. There's so many of them, and actually circulating those can build a really good, or start some really interesting conversations and open people's minds to the importance of DEI within an organization like Ardmore. And it has to be across the organization, but particularly focusing on decision makers. We found it quite easy at the top level, actually, senior management, quite easy to get the buy-in, but you need it to be throughout the organization, particularly with team leads and with anybody who's got hiring responsibilities. It just needs to be just a part of conversation on such a regular basis that it's ingrained into the organizational culture. And then the next step that we found was really important was to broaden people's minds in terms of what diversity in particular means as a concept. People jump immediately, I think, to gender and to ethnicity in particular. Sometimes broadening it out, they might think about things like sexual orientation, or they might think about age. But really getting people to realize that the value in diversity comes from the diversity of perspectives that are brought to the table and the way that we approach business problems. That really broadens it out much, much further. And people start thinking, oh, do we hire from the same school all the time? Are we always posting to the same job sites? Do I allow people on my team to speak up about experiences or perspectives that they have that I might not be aware of? Am I giving them the opportunity to be themselves? So when you really, I suppose, broaden the discussion around what is meant by diversity, that really helps to change the way that people approach diversity and the way that they think in their everyday roles, and really, really helps to, I suppose, start to make a cultural shift within the organization. And then, of course, the next important thing is that diversity alone is hugely valuable, even if there's nothing else. There's huge value in just focusing on diversity. But when you add the inclusion piece to the puzzle, that's where you start to really maximize the benefits of the variety that you have within your organization already and that you can continue to build on over time. If we focus on inclusion and talk particularly to team leads and line managers about the importance of allowing all of their team members to bring themselves to work every day, their unique selves and all of their experiences and all of who they are, then that's really where the magic happens, I think. And then the next step, I suppose, is to work on helping them to put the theory into practice. So sometimes when you're working with diverse teams, things can get a little complex. And I think preparing people for that and ensuring that people don't see that as a negative. There will be conflict, there will be misunderstandings, you'll have cultural differences on teams. And, you know, it takes time for teams, particularly very diverse teams, to settle into a routine, to learn about each other, and helping them to you know, do exercises to build trust, helping team leads to experiment with ways of running meetings. Maybe you will have a rotating chair. Maybe sometimes you'll work with an agenda. Other times you'll focus on brainstorming. That you allow different people with different styles and different approaches. And I think Jenny mentioned it earlier, different learning style or different, I can't remember the term you used, Jenny, was it learning preferences? You know, that we allow people who operate in different ways to really thrive within an organization. When we bring that about and we follow all of those steps, from really creating that understanding of what diversity is and why it's important, focusing on its role in improving performance, focusing on a clear understanding of what diversity is, then working to help teams to really put the diversity and inclusion mindset into practice within an organization, and working with them to iron out any bumps and to really appreciate what's involved in working with a diverse team. That's how we have worked towards cementing a culture of diversity and inclusion within Ardmore. And from there, I think the world opens up in terms of what you can do on diversity and inclusion. And we certainly have a lot more work to do, and I'm sure everyone is in the same boat. But we're very proud of how far we've come so far, and looking forward to seeing what we can accomplish in the future.
Thank you. I mean, it's listening to you talk, I think it's inspiring, to be honest. You know, obviously with what Cargill have done, incredibly inspirational, the way they're going about the talent attraction, but for you as well within that small organisation. And I think that's something that I've seen quite a lot in the industry is we're diverse. And you mentioned that at the beginning, the initial reaction is that we are diverse. And I think it's, you know, establishing that why and helping people with the education and the awareness of bringing it all together. Have you noticed as you've gone on the journey, if you look back to where you started and where you are now, can you see a tangible shift in what that means for you as a business, whether that's from the engagement piece and how people interact together, or from the actual, you know, the results that you were talking about, you know, that we know improve?
I think in terms of attitude, it's very palpable now, the difference in the way that people talk about diversity and inclusion and the understanding of what it means for the organisation. And in terms of, I suppose, output and seeing the benefit of that for us, I think a big part of it has been creativity and innovation. People bringing ideas to the table. Over the past couple of years in Ardmore, the level of contribution from every part of the organisation has been really, really just inspiring to see. People coming up with ideas that are very far outside of their wheelhouse and feeling comfortable to do that and to bring them to the attention of people who maybe are not even in their department, people who they're not working with on a daily basis, and creating that kind of sense of all being in this together and working towards a common goal. I think that has been a real positive of focusing on diversity and inclusion for Ardmore.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm sure that we could carry on talking about this for a very long time, but I think now what we'll do is say thank you, but also just move on, because I'm conscious we've got so much to fit in today as well. Thank you, Aideen. That was really, really insightful. Much appreciated. So now I'd like to introduce us to Joanne Vranos, who is Head of HR, and Paul Wogan, who is CEO, both with Gaslog. And they're going to talk to us about how the DE&I engagement process has developed within Gaslog, which again, I think will be another really insightful discussion. So Joanne and Paul, if you're able to join us and unmute your microphones and pop yourselves on video, that would be fantastic. I think the powers, you're both together. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Hi,
we're
good to
together.
see you.
Hi, can you hear us?
Absolutely. Yes,
Hi.
very much so.
Okay, great. Thanks, Heidi. So just a few words about GasLog for people who don't know us. We have 36 LNG carriers and we have 160 people working onshore. Most of us are based in Greece. We were originally a public company, but now we've gone private with BlackRock having bought out the minority shares. But we also still have a public entity. And the reason I mention that is that because a lot of the DE&I and the ESG external, I guess, making it a priority does come externally. Some of it is internally, but some of it does come from the outside. So when you asked me if if I could present the DE&I journey, I thought I would, ask Paul to join.
Yeah, because we figured that Joanne, being a woman, she needed a man to help her. So.
Yeah. So, so seriously, because actually it's true that, DE&I is a business issue. It's a business issue that you need not to be driven from HR or from any particular one part of the organization. The higher up from the organization, as we say in the charter, when you have a senior executive driving it, that's, I think, where you have the most chance for success. And we focused our DE&I journey on the gender diversity in the beginning. So in the journey, we felt you take the gender part of it and address that, and that becomes a metaphor then for addressing diversity of all different types. Actually, it was Paul's idea to take up DE&I as a priority, as a business priority. And I, resisted it in the beginning because being a woman, I didn't want to become the face of it. I didn't want to be the woman and also the one who's always talking about it. But actually, now you can't hold me down. Now that's only, it was a journey for me as well to think about, I didn't want to be pegged, but then I realized that depending on how you approach it, you can make it an inclusive conversation and not a divisive conversation. And in fact, the first real visible thing that we did in our journey was started by a colleague of mine, Nikki Lloyd, who wanted to set up a Women at GasLog initiative and set it up. And in the beginning, it did create really a stir at GasLog. And, similarly to what Aideen said, 160 people is still, we all know each other. And it's like, why are we focusing on the women? I mean, some of the men said, why don't we have a men at GasLog? And I said, yeah, you do, you have the board. So in the beginning, it was a little bit of discomfort, even talking about these things. But then things started to happen more externally as well. I mean, we had, with the Me Too movement and being publicly listed in the US, we needed to come up with a policy for diversity. And, soon thereafter, ESG became so important, and the S part of ESG, we thought we had to do a lot with diversity. And then, you came along, Heidi, and approached us and talked to us about the DSG. And I think you actually approached Paul originally, and it was Paul's idea to join the DSG.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great initiative. It was the right initiative for us at the right time. A new group with a real focus on our industry, which I think is what we needed. And I think what I really like about the DSG and the way that you were talking about it initially, Heidi, was the fact that you were going to come up with data, because the data really helps us. It opens our eyes. And the first bit of data we collected was, and it goes back to what just about everyone so far has been saying. We worked out we have 50% women in bands 1 to 2, and above band 3 and above, we have 19% women. That's not a statistic we're very proud of, but it was very eye-opening for me to just have that number. And I think for me, it's been a bit of a journey. The Women in GasLog, which was started, was a few years ago, and I thought I was fairly aware of it. suppose using today's phrase, it would be I thought I was woke at that point, but I certainly wasn't. And I've learned that I really wasn't aware of my kind of unconscious biases, the privilege that I had, you know, as a white man in this world. Just wasn't aware. I wasn't aware of it, and so it's been a bit of a personal journey, which I actually really enjoyed, and I know I'm by no means there. But I think going back a little bit to what Aideen said as well, you know, I think there are real business reasons around doing this. Apart from the fact it's the right thing to do, there are real business reasons for doing it. You know, one of the things that we're doing is trying to increase the number of seafarers we have. You know, one of the things that people say in our industry is, the reason it's so men focused is because seafarers come ashore and take the jobs. They're therefore it's men. Well, okay, let's get to the root of that. Let's start to have more cadets on our ships who are female and who can come ashore and do that. And you know, in a world where actually seafarers are becoming scarcer, it's more difficult to recruit them. There's a real business imperative for us. If we can be seen as an employer of choice for female seafarers, that gives us an advantage, and that gives us an advantage bringing those seafarers into the jobs in the UK. But again, sort of picking up a little bit on what Aideen was saying, I do think it's, you know, one of the things I learned very much early on is it's not just about diversity. The inclusion bit is the really important bit. And in fact, I think there are some studies which show if you're just diverse, actually you don't necessarily get the better performance. It's when you have the diversity and you have the inclusion. People do feel part of the team, do feel part of the voice. That's when you really get the business results improving. So, you know, long way to go, but you know, I personally feel very passionate about this, and it's been one of the big things for me this year to sort of try and promote this within the company. We're at the very first steps of a long journey, I think, but really pleased to be part of the DSG and creating this information that we can then use.
Thank you. It's and it's great to have you on board, and you know, everyone who is collaborating as well. And I think that's one of the things that struck me as well is the level of collaboration on this. I think as an industry we haven't been the best at collaborating from company to company and sharing best practices and what we're doing. We've operated a little bit privately, and one of the things that has with this data exercise struck me most of all is that level of sharing. And you know, having people such as yourselves who are real ambassadors, and everyone else we're talking to today, as well as other members who are not participating, but who are really keen to do this for your own organisations, but also for the industry as a whole. Because I think we have finally recognised that actually, as you say, it's the business case, it's the right thing to do, but also, as you rightly said, you've got to have the inclusion as your foundation, because if you do just bring in the diversity and you don't have that inclusion piece, then the people who come in as your diverse representatives will probably also move on quite quickly, or the other people you want to keep in the business may well move on quite quickly instead. So I think it's great what you're doing as well.
So we also feel, Heidi, that the inclusion is then what helps people to move on from bands 1 to band 2. So they don't need to be just at the table, but they need to be included in projects. Think of think out of the box about what kinds of backgrounds or what kinds of expertise you need to include people in projects. Give stretch promotions, take a chance on someone, invite them to the places where the board will see them and the senior management will take notice. All of this is very, very important in order to get that pipeline, not get stuck in the pipeline. And, being members of the DSG has been very helpful for us, especially because of the discussions with other companies that are further along in the journey. I have to say, I think Ingrid is speaking later, just seeing a COO, seeing Ingrid as a COO is an example of a role model that we don't have at GasLog, and we need more role models like that in the industry. And working, some of the discussions that we've had at the DSG has helped us to think about our soft targets and our hard targets, and the kind of targets that we want to set. So certain of our targets now are quite specific and quite hard. Like we want to have women on every short list, especially at the higher levels. We are planning on doing, gender blind candidate assessments to make sure that we are not looking, that we are gender blind, when looking at people. We actually have targets to improve our gender mix at the higher levels. And what Raphael said as well, we do have engagement surveys that we run for the whole population, and we are for the first time asking people to report their gender and seeing if there is a difference in how people experience work gas log depending on their gender. But it is mostly a cultural journey, and so some of our softer targets, some of the initiatives that we're doing that are more addressing the culture is we have workshops, and we had a really great leadership inclusion workshop that tried to get people to understand their own privilege if they are in a group that is, in the core group, to understand that there is an inside group, and that sometimes people feel differently if they're trying to get on the inside versus if they are on the inside, and how we all feel and behave and perform differently when we're on the outside looking in. We also have a mentoring program that we've just started. We've just rolled it out to try and get visibility and exchange of ideas and an understanding from the mentor's point of view, of the mentors from the mentee's point of view of what the actual work experience is. Yeah, and I mean, even things like our flex policy that we're now working on, which we also think is very important for all employees, not just the women, for everyone. But our flex policy, very early on, we had, I think Maersk had shared their policy with us, which was extremely helpful as a great starting point. And I think that, a flex policy where the people who are writing it or coming up with it are from diverse backgrounds is probably a better flex policy for the company, by and for the company.
And I think that discussion was one that we really all took a lot from, and I think there's still pilots going on, isn't there, in terms of some of the flexible working and how that's rolling out. And I think you've highlighted the fact that you're looking at all of these different initiatives as well. It's fascinating, and I think a journey definitely to be watching with yourselves there. And I know that leadership and the inclusion element, you spoke about that before, Joanne, which I think you found incredibly strong. I'm ever so sorry, but I'm going to have to say we've got to move on. And again, I wish we had more time. We could do this all day, but maybe if we can get together next year, we can have a bit more of a chance in person. But thank you both so much for, again, sharing your experiences and your insights, which I think is invaluable to all. And hopefully you'll stay around for the panel discussion, and we'll have some more on that as well. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much.